The morning sun filtered through the glass walls of St. Evangeline Private Clinic, turning the marble floors into a wash of pale, golden light. Dr. Elena Ward walked through the corridor with quiet confidence, her steps measured, her posture straight, her expression calm. It was her first week at the facility, an elite medical center reserved for CEOs, celebrities, foreign diplomats, and people used to having the world bend for them. Elena had worked in public hospitals for nearly a decade, where chaos was constant and gratitude was rare. This new environment was different. Softer lighting, quieter halls, a sense of expensive, curated tranquility. But the work was the same. Patients were patients, bones and blood and fear, no matter how much money wrapped around the problem. She reviewed her schedule as she reached her exam room and froze at the first name, Adrian Blackwell. Even she had heard of him, though not from celebrity gossip or financial news headlines, though there were plenty of those. He was whispered about in professional circles. A man who could buy companies the way others bought coffee. A man who walked into negotiations and left entire industries trembling. The kind of man who did not raise his voice because he did not have to. The world leaned closer when he spoke. Elena took a slow breath and slipped on her coat, smoothing the fabric. It didn't matter who he was. Today, he was simply a patient. She sanitized her hands, checked the equipment, centered herself. Then came the knock. "Send him in," she said, voice steady. The door opened, and silence entered with him. He was tall, not just in height, but in presence, like someone who took up space without speaking. His suit was perfectly tailored, all sharp lines and clean edges, the kind of black that wasn't just dark, it absorbed the light around it. His jaw was strong, dusted with the faintest trace of stubble, as if he had either forgotten to shave or simply didn't care to. His eyes were darker still, deep, assessing, unreadable. The room seemed smaller for a moment. "Mr. Blackwell," Elena said, gesturing for him to sit. "I'm Dr. Elena Ward. I'll be conducting your physical evaluation today." He inclined his head politely, but his expression remained closed, controlled. "Routine insurance requirement," he said, his voice low, almost quiet. But it carried, resonant in the air between them. "We can make it quick." He expected detachment, efficiency, a transaction. Elena nodded and began the exam. She asked standard questions. He answered with minimal words, not cold, just absent, as though speaking cost him something he refused to waste. When she stepped closer to check his pulse, she expected the same steady professionalism she always had. She placed her fingertips lightly against his wrist, and his pulse leapt. Her eyes flicked up. His were already on hers. The moment stretched, quiet but electric, charged like the air before a storm breaks. For a man known for control, the shift was unmistakable. Something sharp, unguarded, dangerous, flashed in his eyes. A muscle in his jaw tightened. His breath caught, not visible, but felt, like a ripple in the air. Elena kept her face composed, but her own heartbeat betrayed her, skipping once, twice. She withdrew her hand slowly, not wanting to show haste. "Your pulse is elevated," she said softly. "It shouldn't be," he answered, his voice different now. Lower, rougher around the edges. Their eyes held, and something old inside both of them. Something long silent. Exhaled. Not attraction. Not yet. Recognition. Two wounded animals hearing another heartbeat in the dark. Elena returned to her notes, forcing her breathing to steady. Adrian sat completely still, except for the faint movement of his fingers curling once, slowly, like someone adjusting to unfamiliar sensation. Neither of them commented further. But both knew something had just shifted, something they could not name, something that would not be undone, and neither understood why his heart, so guarded, so controlled, had reacted to her at all. The next morning. The clinic felt different to Elena, though nothing in the building had changed. The same white walls, the same quiet halls, the same air of polite wealth. Yet something under her skin felt awake like a wire pulled tight and humming. She tried to ignore it as she reviewed her charts, but every thought slid back to one place, to one moment, to one man, Adrian. Blackwell did not make appointments without reason, yet he had requested a follow-up for today far sooner than medically necessary. There was no clinical justification for it, and both of them knew it. Elena reminded herself to remain professional, to stand in the calm center of her own mind. But her pulse betrayed her each time she remembered the feel of his wrist, the sudden quickening of his heartbeat under her fingertips, the look in his eyes as if something inside him had remembered how to feel after years of silence. She was still thinking of that when the door opened and he stepped inside again. He did not waste words. He never seemed to need them. He simply sat and watched her with a gaze that saw more than he asked. His presence was quiet but powerful. Like the moment before, thunder breaks across the sky. "You came earlier than recommended," Elena said gently, trying to keep the room steady. He held her eyes, and for the first time, something unguarded flickered in his expression. Something like confusion, but sharper, as if he was not used to questioning himself. "I had time today," he replied, but the answer did not feel like the truth. It felt like a shield. She approached him with her stethoscope, and he looked away as if bracing for impact. She placed it against his chest, and his breath caught not visibly, but in the way the space between them shifted, like gravity had tilted. His heartbeat was steady at first, slow, controlled. Then her fingers brushed his collarbone by accident, and the rhythm broke its pace, quickening, pulsing alive like something had startled awake inside him. He closed his eyes, for a moment, not to hide, but to endure. As if he was not accustomed to feeling anything. He could not manage. Elena stepped back too quickly this time. She felt warmth run through her at the same moment he opened his eyes again. And there it was, that same silent recognition that something unexplainable had happened twice now. She lowered her gaze, pretending to adjust her clipboard, but he spoke before she could regain her careful calm. "Tell me something, doctor. What exactly did you feel yesterday, when you touched me?" His voice was quiet, yet it filled every inch of the room. She froze. Not because she did not know the answer, but because she did. She had felt him break. Not physically, but emotionally. Like stone, cracking under pressure, revealing heat at the core. "I felt your heart react," she replied simply, refusing to dress it in anything more. He held her gaze for a long moment, and something in him slowly shattered the smallest fraction of a wall he had spent years constructing. "That should not happen," he said softly, but the way he said it held fear. Not denial. Outside the sky, darkened clouds gathering heavy with rain, and though neither of them moved, the room was no longer the same one they had entered, and Elena knew this was no longer just a checkup. It was the beginning of something that could ruin them both, or save them in ways they had never believed possible. Rain struck against the clinic windows like fingertips tapping for attention, and the sky outside hung low and heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Elena stood at the sink, washing her hands slower than usual, trying to quiet the noise in her own chest, but the silence only made the memory stronger. The memory of his heartbeat racing beneath her touch, the memory of the way his eyes had searched hers as if asking a question he could not voice. She had seen many reactions in her career. Fear, anxiety, pain, but never that a controlled man losing hold of something he did not even know he was gripping. Soft knock sounded at the door, and she already knew who stood behind it, before she turned. Adrian Blackwell entered with the same deliberate calm, but something was different today. A tension that lived beneath the skin, like heat under stone. He did not sit this time. He simply stood across from her as though the chair, the desk, the clinic itself could not contain the pressure in the air between them. "You asked me yesterday what I felt," Elena said, her voice steady, though her fingers trembled, and she hid them in her coat pocket. I did not answer fully. She paused. He did not move. I felt recognition. The words settled between them like a match. Landing in dry grass, Adrian stepped closer only a fraction. But it shifted everything. His voice was quiet when he spoke, and that softness was more powerful than any command. I have spent years building a life where feeling is optional, where connection is liability and vulnerability is war. He was not confessing. He was stating truth the way one might describe the shape of their own scars. I am always in control. Always. But you. He stopped as if the next words were more dangerous than silence. Elena felt the air tighten around them, a gravity pulling two worlds into collision. She should have stepped back. She should have reminded him of boundaries, of professionalism, of logic. She did none of these things. Instead, she reached for the stethoscope resting on the counter and lifted it gently. She did not ask permission. She simply placed the cold metal against his chest and laid her fingertips against his pulse point once more. His heartbeat struck against her touch like a wild thing trapped. He sucked in a breath, and his hands curled into fists at his sides, not with anger, but with effort. The effort of not reaching for her rein thundered against the window, louder now, echoing the storm rising inside both of them. "Tell me," Elena said softly, "what are you afraid will happen if you let this be real?" Adrian opened his eyes, and for the first time she saw what lay behind the steel. The power. The silence, not emptiness. Something far more human. He spoke like a man remembering a fire he once burned inside of. "I have loved before and it ruined everything. I became something I never wanted to be. So I learned to feel nothing. Because nothing cannot be used against you." Elena breathed in slowly, letting his truth settle into the room. Then she placed the stethoscope aside and met his gaze without hesitation. "Then why is your heart still fighting to live?" The question hit him with the force of lightning. His control wavered, his breath unsteady, his composure fractured. And in that instant, she saw not the billionaire, not the man the world bowed to, but someone who had once believed in love and lost it. But before either of them could speak, footsteps approached outside the door. Sharp, swift, purposeful. Someone was coming, and whatever was growing between them was no longer something they could keep contained behind clinic walls. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and the handle turned slowly as if the person on the other side already knew there was something worth interrupting. Elena stepped back first, forcing her breath to steady, forcing her hands to stay still, forcing her heart to return to the calm rhythm she had trained for years. Adrian did not move. He simply shifted his gaze back to the mask he wore for the world, unreadable, unshakable, untouchable. The door opened and the head administrator, Dr. Langford, entered with a polite smile, but his eyes searched the room too carefully. "We have a situation," he said, and though his tone was gentle, there was weight beneath it. "A member of the board will be touring today, and we need all senior staff available." His eyes flicked between Elena and Adrian, noticing something he could not name but could feel. Elena nodded smoothly. "I will be there shortly." Dr. Langford hesitated 1 second longer, then left, closing the door behind him. Silence returned, but it was different now, charged as if everything left unsaid was alive in the air. Adrian finally spoke, his voice, controlled again, but not quite as cold as before. "Tell me something, Dr. Ward." He said her name slowly, as if testing it. "What is it?" you are running from? Alina held his gaze, and the question pierced deeper than she expected, because she had been running before she ever stepped into this clinic. She saw flashes in her mind, a hospital hallway years ago. Voices raised reputations, destroyed trust, broken not by mistake, but by cruelty. She had once believed that compassion was strength, until someone proved to her that vulnerability was ammunition. My past was used against me, she said quietly. Her tone stripped of pretense. I trusted the wrong person, and I paid for it. So I learned to rebuild my life somewhere. No one knew who I had been. Adrian listened, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity. Something closer to recognition again. That quiet knowing that belonged only to people who had broken and rebuilt themselves. We are more alike than I expected, he said. But the way he said it held no surprise, only acceptance. Before she could respond, thunder cracked outside, shaking the windows, and a sharp flash of lightning lit his face for a brief moment. He looked human. Then not a legend, not a story, not a name whispered in power circles. Just a man who once trusted and suffered for it. Alina stepped away to prepare for the board visit. But when she reached the door, he spoke again. His voice was softer than she had ever heard it. Whatever made my heart react. It was not weakness. She stopped in the doorway, her hand hovering just above the handle. She did not turn back, but her voice carried a quiet strength. I know, she left the room, and the hallway felt colder than before. Behind her, Adrian remained standing alone, one hand instinctively pressed to the place where her touch had been, as if something long dormant was waking inch by inch. Neither of them knew that. Someone else had been watching, someone who recognized that spark. Someone who had once believed Adrian Blackwell belonged entirely to them, and that person was not going to let him go without a fight. That afternoon, the clinic was filled with quiet, voices and rehearsed smiles as the board members made their rounds. The halls were polished, the staff alert, everything curated to appear seamless. Elena walked with them, answering questions, presenting calmly, but beneath her composure, her thoughts were somewhere else in a room that still held the echo of a heartbeat that should not have reacted. She did not notice the woman stepping into the hallway until she spoke, her voice smooth and sharpened like silk, folded over steel. So this is the new doctor. Elena turned and found herself facing a woman who looked like she had been sculpted for attention. Tall, elegant, with eyes that didn't look at you. They looked through you. The kind of beauty that was meant to be seen and remembered. Isabella. Elena recognized the name in an instant. Not from gossip, but from the quiet tone people used when discussing dangerous storms. She had been Adrian's fiancée once, or rather almost fiancée. The world knew the story, but no one knew the truth. Adrian had never spoken of it, but the pain in his silence had said enough. Isabella smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of someone who believed she was already 2 moves ahead of everyone else. I've heard about you, she said calmly, as though they were old acquaintances and not strangers circling the same flame. I wanted to meet the woman who seems to have his attention. Elena felt her heartbeat slow, not with fear, but with the clarity that arrives when truth stands undisguised. I am his physician, Elena answered evenly. Nothing more. Isabella's laugh was light, but cold. Please don't insult both of us. The board members continued walking ahead, oblivious. Elena stayed silent, choosing professionalism over pride. But Isabella stepped closer, her perfume floral, but her tone venom. Men like Adrian don't fall Elena Ward. They choose. And they never choose someone who doesn't understand the cost. Elena held her gaze quietly. Some of us aren't afraid to pay it. The slightest flicker of irritation crossed Isabella's face, a hairline crack in perfect porcelain, before she smoothed it away. But the message was clear. Isabella had noticed Adrian's reaction before either of them spoke it aloud, and she did not like it. Later, that evening the rain continued to fall, turning the city into reflections and blurred lights. Elena stood outside under her umbrella, her shift finally over, ready to leave this day behind, when a familiar car pulled up silently at the curb. Adrian stepped out before she could speak. The rain hitting his suit instantly darkening the fabric, but he did not seem to feel it. His eyes found hers with a gravity that was not accidental. "We need to talk," he said, and there was no command in his tone, only something honest and stripped bare. She nodded, and for a moment they simply stood there, each facing a choice that would change everything. The storm around them was loud, but the silence between them was louder, before either of them could take a single step. A voice cut through the rain from behind them. Isabella stood there. No umbrella, no hesitation. The rain running down her face like tears. She did not feel. "You left something unfinished." Adrian turned, and the world held still in the space between them, and Elena understood. The real storm had only just begun. The rain kept pouring as if the sky had decided the world needed to drown in it. Elena stood between them, unsure if she was witnessing the end of something or the beginning. Adrian's jaw tightened. Not with anger, but with exhaustion. The kind earned from battles fought too long with no rest. Isabella stepped closer, ignoring how her hair clung to her face from the storm. Her voice was soft, but sharp, the kind that cuts, without raising volume. "Adrian, we never finished our conversation," she said, as if Elena weren't there, as if nothing had changed in the years since their engagement shattered. Adrian did not look away from Elena, even when he spoke his words low, controlled final. "There is nothing left to finish." For the first time, Isabella's composure faltered only a fraction, but enough to reveal something raw, beneath the elegance and calculation. She looked at Elena then, and the truth inside her gaze was not jealousy. It was fear. The fear of losing something she believed was hers, by right, not love possession. She lifted her chin. "If you walk away from me, fine. But don't pretend this does not matter. Your company, your image, your alliances, they were built alongside me. People expect us together. The world expects it, and the world does not forgive sudden changes." Elena felt something shift at those words, an unspoken revelation. This was not heartbreak. This was strategy. Isabella was not fighting for Adrian's heart. She was fighting for the power that came from standing beside him. Adrian finally turned to look at Isabella, and there was no anger in his eyes, only clarity. "Years ago, you betrayed me," he said not loudly. But the rain quieted, as if to hear. "When I needed truth, you gave me lies. When I gave trust, you traded it for advantage. Our story ended the moment you chose yourself over us." Isabella's breath caught, but instead of breaking, she hardened. "The past can be rewritten," she insisted. "People forget. They move on. We can build again." "No?" Adrian said, and the words sounded like a door closing for the last time. Silence stretched. Then Isabella's gaze shifted to Elena, studying her. Not with hatred, but calculation. "You think you know him," she said quietly. "You think your presence means something. But men like him are born to power, and power demands sacrifice. Are you prepared to be the one who pays it?" Elena did not flinch. Not because she had no fear, but because she had nothing left in her life that could be taken from her, except herself. And she had already rebuilt that. Once she met Isabella's eyes evenly. "I am not here to own him or be owned. By him, I am here, because something in both of us woke when we met. And whatever that is It is not something you can negotiate or manufacture. Isabella's expression flickered once more, and then she stepped back, defeated not by weakness, but by truth that could not be argued. She turned and walked away, the rain swallowing her figure as if the storm had claimed her. The world seemed to exhale. Adrian looked at Elena, not with intensity this time, but with something heavier, something that mattered. There are things you still do not know about what happened before, he said, his voice quiet and tired. But I want to tell you all of it, if you let me. Elena nodded slowly. Let's start with the truth. They stood there in the rain, two people who had forgotten how to feel learning again, drop by drop, breath by breath. But neither of them saw the car parked across the street, engine running, headlights off, someone watching, someone recording, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The storm outside was ending. The storm inside their lives was only beginning. Rainwater still clung to Elena's coat when she stepped into her apartment later that night. But the storm outside felt quieter than the one inside her chest. She set her bag down and leaned against the wall, letting the silence settle around her, finally breathing without the weight of eyes watching debates, unspoken decisions waiting to be made. But peace did not last long. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. Once no caller ID, just a message that made the nightfall heavier. Be careful who you trust. She froze without moving a single inch, the world narrowing to that one line. No punctuation, no explanation, but the meaning clear. Someone was watching someone, knew someone wanted her to fear. She refused to respond. She refused to let the panic show even to herself. She simply turned the screen face down and closed her eyes until her heartbeat steadied again. Across the city, Adrian sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by glass walls that looked over a skyline still dripping with rain. He stood alone in silence the way he always had. But tonight, the silence was no longer shelter. It was a question. For years he had kept himself shielded, invulnerable, unreachable. And yet, all it took was the brush of her fingertips to unravel him. Piece by piece, breath by breath, memory by memory. He poured himself a glass of water, his hand steady but his mind anything but. He thought of Isabella, her warning, her desperation, and the past he had locked behind steel gates in his chest. He no longer feared Isabella, but he feared the damage she could still do, because the woman watching from inside that car was not jealous. She was calculating. Elena returned to the clinic the next morning, pretending nothing had changed, but everything had. She felt the air watching her as she moved, the way nurses whispered softer, the way a few glances lingered a second too long. Rumors spreading like cracks in glass, silent but unstoppable, walked into her exam room and stopped. A bouquet of white lilies sat on the counter, their petals damp as if they had been caught in the rain. A card tucked between them, handwritten in elegant looping script. We are not finished. No signature was needed. The meaning was unmistakable. Isabella had drawn first blood. Not loud, not public, but quiet. Psychological, precise. Elena did not touch the flowers. She simply turned away and opened the window, letting the wind begin to tear the petals apart. The flowers, falling petal by petal onto the street below. She would not let fear root itself inside her. Again. Later that afternoon, Adrian arrived for his appointment. No suit jacket this time, sleeves rolled back as if he had walked straight out of a war room. He looked at her and she saw it. He was not here for medical reasons. He was here because something inside him refused to stay distant any longer. We are no longer in a place where silence can protect us. He said, his voice low and unwavering. Everything you walked away from in your past and everything I buried in mine, it is coming back. Elena met his gaze without looking away. Then we face it, she said simply, not as patient and doctor, not as two people pretending this is nothing, but as two people who know exactly what is at stake. Adrian stepped closer, not touching her, not speaking, just letting the air between them shift again, that familiar silent recognition. Two broken lives beginning to align. But before either of them could take another breath, the clinic lights flickered, then went out. The entire building swallowed by sudden darkness. Someone had cut the power deliberately, quietly, without warning, and in the dark, a truth became unavoidable. This was no longer about love or fear or past wounds. Someone wanted one of them gone, and they were no longer fighting only for their hearts. They were fighting for their lives. The darkness fell fast and complete, the kind that steals shapes and sound and sense. All at once, Elena felt the air shift, and she knew this was not a simple outage. Power in a facility like this did not fail. It was cut with intention. She took one slow breath, steadying her pulse, while her mind traced the room by memory, the counter, the exam chair, the distance, to the door, Adrian's position. He did not move. He stood in the dark, like someone who had lived inside shadows, long before lights ever mattered. "Stay close," he said, his voice low, steady, not commanding, just real. Elena took one step toward the sound of him, and then another until her shoulder brushed the edge of his sleeve. He was warm, grounding, alive. From somewhere deeper in the building came the faint echo of hurried footsteps, not running but searching. Whoever had entered was not hiding. They wanted to be felt, not seen. Emergency lights flickered once, struggling against the dark, then failed again, leaving only the faint outline of lightning from the storm outside, casting brief flashes across the walls. In one flash, Elena saw Adrian watching the door. In the next flash, she saw the shadow of someone moving toward them. Adrian reacted first. He took Elena's wrist, not in panic, but in certainty, guiding her behind him with the quiet precision of someone who had been trained to survive. Not businessmen, not negotiators, but men who grew empires in worlds where protection was not guaranteed. But taken. The footsteps stopped just outside the room. No words, just waiting. Elena felt heat rise in her chest, not fear but the instinct to fight. The instinct she had buried long ago when she walked away from the version of herself that knew how to survive. But tonight, that version returned. Suddenly backup power surged. A dim red emergency glow washed over the halls, revealing the figure at the doorway, Dr. Langford, but not as she had seen him before. His expression too calm, too prepared, too knowing. "Everything all right in here?" he asked, his tone smooth but hollow. Elena met his eyes, and in that instant, she recognized something she had missed. Dr. Langford had been here longer than anyone. He managed schedules, he approved hiring, he handled confidential files, including hers, including Adrian's. The message, the lilies, the timing. This was not Isabella acting alone. This was someone who had been gathering strings long before the first spark had ignited between her and Adrian. Adrian stepped slightly forward, placing himself between Elena and Langford without appearing aggressive. "We are fine," Adrian said, but his tone held steel, and Langford heard it. The administrator smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but like a man who believed he had the upper hand. "Good. We would not want anything unexpected to happen." He turned and walked away, leaving the door open, the hallway, stretching long and quiet, like a warning. Elena exhaled slowly. "He knows," she whispered. Adrian nodded once. He has known. The storm outside pounded the windows again as if echoing the truth. This was never about jealousy. It was about control, power, reputation, legacy. Elena's past had been ruined this way once Adrian's heart had been broken. This way once. Someone had been watching both of them. For years. Waiting for the moment they would find each other. But now that they had, someone was determined to tear them apart, and neither of them had any intention of letting that happen. The night did not end, it only changed shape. Elena and Adrian left the clinic together, moving through the lobby that now felt like a stage set for something watching, waiting, calculating. Outside the rain had stopped, but the streets glistened with the memory of it. The air cool and heavy, like whispers that had not yet found a voice. They did not speak in the car. Adrian drove in silence. One hand steady on the wheel, the other resting loosely as if holding a thought he could not say. Elena sat beside him, watching the lights of the city blur past each one, streaking like a question without an answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. Dr. Langford knew about us before there was an us. Adrian nodded, not in shock, but acceptance. This was not new to him. Surveillance, leverage. Threats hidden behind courtesy. Someone wants you gone, she continued. No. Adrian's voice was steady, firm, certain. They want us separated. They arrived at Adrian's penthouse, but tonight it felt less like luxury and more like a battlefield. He led her inside, not touching her, but staying near enough that the space between them hummed with unfinished confession. Elena set her coat down and turned to him. Tell me everything. No avoidance, no silence, no armor. Adrian stood still for a moment, as though deciding whether to reopen a wound that had never fully healed. Then he spoke. Years ago, he had fallen in love. Honestly, fully, recklessly. Isabella had been his beginning when he believed trust was strength. But she had not loved him. She had loved the empire around him, the access, the influence, the throne. And when she realized he could not love her the way she needed to be seen, she traded him for power. She leaked private board documents, risking everything he was building, and blamed it on a rising competitor. Adrian took the fall to protect his employees. His company survived, but his belief in love did not. Elena listened, her breath slow, her eyes never leaving his face. She did not comfort him. She understood, instead, for pain like his did not need softness. It needed recognition. Then Adrian spoke the part he had never told another soul. Langford was part of it. He confirmed the forged documents. He sold the narrative. He profited from Adrian's downfall. Elena felt the room tilt, the floor shift, the truth settling like thunder waiting to strike. So Langford did not just know he owed Isabella. He still worked for her. They had taken everything from Adrian years ago, and now they wanted to make sure he never rose again. But something was different now. Adrian was no longer alone. Elena stepped closer, not touching him, just close enough for the air to change again. That strange, quiet gravity that existed only when they stood near each other. We will not run. We will not hide. We will not break. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time since she met him, something inside him let go of the walls he had lived behind. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic vow, just truth. I believe you, he said, and the world inside him shifted. But belief is dangerous, especially when someone is listening. Because outside on the balcony, bent forward in the shadows, a figure held a phone. Recording, watching, planning. The final strike had already begun. The morning came, without sunlight, the sky heavy with gray, the way the world looks just before something breaks. Elena woke first, the apartment quiet, the city below muted by fog. Adrian had fallen asleep sitting upright on the sofa, as if he had spent the entire night forcing himself to stay alert. Even in rest, The exhaustion in him was not physical. It was the kind a person carries when they have survived too much. Alone. Elena approached the balcony to open the curtains but stopped. There on the glass was a single fingerprint smear, fresh. Not theirs. Someone had stood there watching them close enough to touch the window, close enough to breathe on the glass. The threat had not been metaphor. It was real. Present inside the walls, Adrian woke the same moment. She saw it, his instincts faster than thought. He stood beside her without asking what was wrong. He saw the print. His jaw tightened in silence. They were not just being watched. They were being hunted. Before panic could gather, a notification buzzed. On Adrian's phone, one video file. No sender name. He opened it. The footage showed the two of them together in the clinic room, the moment Elena's hand touched his chest, the moment his breath broke, the moment his walls fell. The angle was high. Near the ceiling, a hidden camera. Placed long before she ever transferred there. The video ended on the image of their eyes. Locked. No words, just evidence. Evidence meant to destroy careers, reputations, credibility. Evidence meant to ruin her the way she had been ruined once before. Evidence meant to silence him the way he had silenced his own heart for years. Elena did not cry. She did not shake. She had already been broken once and rebuilt herself from dust. There was nothing left in her that could shatter. "Send it," she said quietly. Adrian turned sharply. "That is exactly what they want." "No." She stepped closer, her voice steady. "Send it to the board before they do. No scandal. No hiding. No weakness to exploit. The truth ends when we put it in." The light Adrian looked at her, then truly looked and saw not vulnerability, not fear, but strength, the kind built from surviving fire. He sent the video to the entire board with one message: "This is real, and I will not apologize for it." Minutes later, his phone began ringing. Calls, messages. Urgent, alarmed. Demanding explanation. But before answering any of them, Adrian turned to Elena. One last time, making a choice, not driven by pressure, not driven by fear, but driven by the part of him that had been asleep for years. "Elena, I do not want control anymore. I want you. Not because I need you to fill something, but because when you are near, I can feel again." Elena felt her chest tighten, not with pain but with recognition, the same recognition that had lived between them since the first touch. Her voice was soft when she answered. "Then we feel together." No dramatic kiss, no sweeping embrace, just two hearts finally allowed to breathe. Later that day, the board met. Langford attempted to speak first, but Isabella walked in. Her eyes not triumphant, but resigned. She had lost, not because she was weaker, but because what she fought for had never been love. Adrian stood beside Elena in front of them all, not hiding her, not shielding her, but standing with her. The board did not fire her. They did not censure him. They accepted the truth. Because truth spoken openly has no shadows left to weaponize. Langford resigned that same afternoon. Isabella left without another word. And the storm that had waited so long finally passed. Weeks later, Elena opened a small clinic of her own, not hidden, not afraid. A place where healing was not just medical, it was human. Adrian funded it quietly, but his name was not on the door. He came in the evenings after work, sat beside her while she charted patients, talked with her without walls. Their hands would sometimes touch. Nothing dramatic, just real steady, certain, not a love that arrived in fire, but a love that rose from embers. Slow, honest, alive. She thought it was just a checkup, but it was the moment two hearts remembered themselves and refused to forget again.